What you're about to engage in is a special recording of the Equity Challenge brought to you through United Way of Rhode Island in partnership with Slate Media. My name's Kevin Mata, and I'll be your facilitator and guide for this year's Equity Challenge journey. These are real stories told by real people meant to humanize the purpose of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and actually highlight the unity behind it. Welcome to the journey. We're excited to have you here. Welcome. We've got a lot to talk about, and I'm really excited that you all are here for day 4 of the Equity Challenge. And the topic is really around DEI being transformative, right? So we've taken people through DEI is universal. It's good for the good of everybody. DEI is neighborly. It's the right thing to do by people, right? If your neighbor's house floods, it's probably going to impact yours too. And it's intentional. So now we're talking about it's that part where it takes action, right? It comes into life form. But I want to introduce the two of you because you're both very, very special and distinguished guests. There's two of you, but there's also Kyle's hat, which we'll get to later at some point.
The reason I came to see that.
The reason why you came, exactly. That's why we all come.
I just want to figure out what a podcast is.
Exactly, which we'll figure that out too afterwards as well. So why don't you start off and tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and why you're here today, maybe.
Okay, so we're gonna save the best for last. I like that. So let's get the boring person out the way.
No,
so-
I like to go in order, I like to go.
I feel like I'm seasoned. So my name is Larome Myrick. I serve in my day job as the Director of Juvenile Justice for the State of Rhode Island, known as the Division of Youth Development. So I oversee here in Rhode Island a training school, probation, and do a lot of other work at that job.
Yeah, big time community builder.
Yeah, I do a lot of work with the city and state. At the city and state level, so a lot of different boards, organizations, because I'm here to serve, so that's what I do. And I teach at a couple universities and in the meantime.
We're just talking about, I don't know how he does
Slacker.
all of what he does. And not an original Rhode Islander, though.
No, from the great state of Ohio.
All right, well, there you go. Hopefully we have a transformed Ohioan to Rhode Islander.
We transform Ohio too in some ways.
Yeah, there you go. Kyle.
I'm Kyle Bennett, Chief of Staff
Yes.
and Public Affairs Officer for United Way.
That
I also have the distinct pleasure of overseeing our public policy team and get to work with them and helping them move and shape policy for Rhode Island and in Rhode Island at the local, state, and federal level. And I have the real pleasure of working with one of our newest initiatives at United Way, the Alliance for Nonprofit Impact. Talking about transformative, this initiative really has become a backbone for the nonprofit sector in service to people of Rhode Island. And when we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, the Alliance really is an exemplary model of how to engage organizations from all different demographics that serve people across Rhode Island in a way that is positive and impactful.
Absolutely, yeah. So lots of transformation already, right? I mean, transformation happens in so many ways, right? It's transforming from running a large statewide organization to then transforming to being an educator in the evening,
right.
to transforming people's lives through nonprofits, through health, through support, even transforming from one job to another, right? Like we just recognized.
Even leaving from Ohio was transformational for me coming here.
Yeah.
When I moved here, I didn't even know where Rhode Island was at. I applied for a job. I said, I know I wanted to be a director. I've been in corrections. This is my 25th year. I started when I was 3 in case.
Exactly. No, I was doing the math in my head.
I started at 3. And so my 25th year, but when I first got the job, I was like, I want to be a director one day. I didn't know what a director did. I just saw the directors walk by, shake hands, kiss babies, and like, how they
Go a bit more work.
I went to a couple more meetings. I got the job. I'm like, whoa, this is really it. But I applied for the job and came out East Coast. Cause I knew I wasn't getting the job. Like, why would they pick me? And why would they select me? And know what I mean? Now I'm like, why not? They made a good choice.
Absolutely.
Right. But coming here, I knew no one. I barely knew where Rhode Island was at because I saw the job and I said, oh, Rhode Island, okay, that's not too far from like Staten Island or Long Island.
I lived in New York for a little bit, and when I told people I was moving back to Rhode Island, they're like, so we'll see you. I was like, no, like we're not seeing each other anymore because New York's that far.
Right.
But they were thinking I was moving to Long Island. I was like, no,
that too.
Rhode Island. And I say, so did you?
So just transformed here. I'm like, but I've been here 7 years, really enjoying it. Like it was the best personal and professional decision I could have made. So that's just transformation in it itself.
Yeah. But you said something that's really transformational. You said you went from thinking why would they pick me to now going, why wouldn't they pick me? What flipped that switch for you?
Well, I remember during my interview, and I'll give you the real short version. It's a Larome short version, so it's
All right, we'll take
we're gonna
it.
call it a Larome short version. But during my interview, and afterwards, the former director said, "We're gonna I'm gonna give you opportunity to do it. It's a really big job, but I want you to be my person doing the job." In my head, I thought like, it ain't too big. You pick me, and I got the job, and it was a lot bigger than what I expected. And then over the year, I came to know and grown, and just being a part of the Rhode Island community. I think that's what really helped out my relationships locally. But for my relationships locally, I have now relationships nationally across the world, really.
Absolutely.
So that's really like helped me out, just because I was welcomed, and I still feel welcome.
Absolutely. Rhode Islanders, I would say we're welcoming, right, Kyle?
To some. But we remind you that you're not a real Rhode Islander every chance we get.
Right.
And I don't know what that means, right? I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and was transplanted here by the age of 1. And every once in a while, someone will tell me I'm not a real Rhode Islander. I'm like, I went to Roger Williams Daycare, Henry Barner School, school, right? Rick, I'm like, I'm a Rhode, yeah, kind of. But I think we still give you a little bit of ribbing, because while we're welcoming, we have tremendous pride in being a Rhode Islander and knowing that each community really is special here.
Everyone is unique. I know where I'm from is like, it took me 40 minutes to get my daughter to school every morning. And here, if I say that in Rhode Island, they're like,
So what? Where are you going?
they're like, that's too far.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, we take traffic for granted here so much.
When I first got the job, I said, I knew I was moving by myself. I said, I want to move around where people live by themselves. I don't want to be around families and communities or none of that kind of stuff. So I asked the guy who I was working with, I said, where should I move? He said, your office is going to be in Cranston, so you need to be in Cranston. I said, I'm going to live in Providence because it's the capital city. Didn't know anything about Providence. But
We were imagining it was like 3 hours away.
yes. So I went to Providence and went to the place, toured the place anyway, because I wanted to cancel my appointment. And I drove to the office. It was 9 minutes.
Yep. People will do that.
9 minutes.
I want you to know, like, we're not surprised that.
So I turned to a Rhode Islander. There's something over 5 minutes, like, I don't want to go.
I know you got
Or you got to pick me up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Same. So let's talk about transformation and change and diversity, equity, and inclusion. Kyle, tell me a little bit about what's been something that's been transformative, either big or small, thanks to the efforts of DEI, right? The whole point of this is humanizing. DEI isn't this scary, fearful thing, but it actually benefits all of us.
I'll tell you, at United Way, one thing that's been transformative is the hiring practice and having an intentionality on hiring people who look like and come from the communities that we serve. When I first joined, I was one of a handful of people of color, the only Black man in the organization at the time. I'm pretty positive. We had a part-time staffer who was seasonal staffer who was older and retired and volunteered with us, but the only Black man in the organization. And then I look at us now and I think about not just having a racial diversity, but an ethnic diversity, a geographical diversity, where people live in Mass and Connecticut who still come to the table every day in service of our communities. And then when I think of all of the other demographics that are represented within our body of staff, right? 94 people represent 1.1 million. When folks walk through the front door, there is always someone that can relate to them and they can relate to, more importantly. When we have applicants for a new position, they reach out and they ask because they know people from our staff, right?
Oh, yeah.
Our staff are from the communities that we serve. So this has been a transformative and transformational opportunity to really think not just about who we're employing, but how we best serve the state of Rhode Island. And I think we are stronger and better for it.
Absolutely, right. And that, again, in yesterday's conversation, we talked about intentionality, right? DEI takes intentionality, which means slowing down. It means, right, looking at diverse applicants from Ohio, right? And without going, oh, we know this person, they're a Rhode Islander, so let's just hire them, right?
Right.
It takes intentionality to make change and to make it be transformative. And that's what happens when DEI is actually at its work, right? When it's working, when it's at its best as well. You feel it, you see it, you hear it, right? It comes up and you go like, wow, this is a different culture, right? That's transformation, that's change. It changes who gets a seat at the table and what's on the table as well, which I think is something that's so special. So talk to me a little bit about what you're seeing right now as a part of transformation due to DEI, Larome?
I would say just in the criminal justice field, just criminal justice industry as a whole. So when I first came there, people would talk about when I was growing up, I was always told that Black people committed more crimes and were the criminals and all that kind of stuff, that narrative. So then 25 years ago, I get into the system as I worked my job at a maximum security prison back in Ohio. And you would go to, and they just did for the most part, a Black-white binary. So the Black people incarcerated and white people incarcerated. And numbers looked equal. So one would say, at least a 19, 20-year-old Larome, I'm like, oh, same amount of Black people commit crimes as white folks. So that's what I thought. And then I would look at later on, I would join some national organizations, one in particular, the National Association of Blacks in Criminal Justice. And at the time, they had this thing called disproportionate minority contact or disproportionate minority confinement, either or. And what that meant, look at the disproportionate number of people of color incarcerated. And so from that, I got to realize, one, that the system, that disproportionality existed in there. And we were allowed to pretty much talk about that. So about the age 20, 21, 22, I really started taking a look into that. And so you fast forward to 2020, 2022, I'm able to sit on a lot of different national organizations. And I actually got to call out like the racial inequities in the system and say like, hey, we can't just do another deep dive. We can't just say like, yeah, we got all these people of color in prison. Oh, it's too bad, so sad. But what are we really doing about it?
Correct.
So I was on different committees with a lot of my peers across the country. And we were like, hey, we really need to tackle this, the disproportionality. And more than just with a deep dive, more than just with a study, but with actionable items. So I, along with a lot of my colleagues across the nation, took real intention in that. And it was easy stuff that we had to do. And it was some difficult stuff. Some of the easy stuff, one was just allowing us to collect the data, to do something with the data, to share the data, to be transparent with the data, and also involve other people in there and say, like, what can we do? And it wasn't just a Black thing, it wasn't just a white thing, but it was a us thing.
Correct.
To do this work.
Changing the system. Right?
Changing the system.
It's transformation at its finest, but it's also one of the most difficult things to do because, to your point, data isn't always accessible.
Right.
Being able to find people or even correcting that narrative or that truth takes a lot of hard work, and most folks aren't willing to put in that type of work.
Right.
So where are you at now with this process?
Oh, there was a baseball game. We ain't even selling tickets yet.
Okay, all right.
No, I'm teasing. Well, we're pretty far, but of course we know that with different administrations come a lot of different challenges. So it feels like we're going back to the future, but yet we're still continuing to press on. Because a lot of people who were with you on this journey, now they're like, I got to be cautious, or I'm not in it, or my heart was never in it. And that's okay, because we're going to keep going. We still have our core group of people. And even if that core is just me, I'm still going to keep on continuing doing the right thing by people.
I appreciate you for doing that. Thanks. Kyle, what about for you? What's DEI and transformative, or what resonated with you?
I'd piggyback on Larome's comment. During my time at United Way, we had similar inquiries where we're looking for data that just didn't exist. We visit with the prison and prisoners. We'd also talk with local law enforcement, and then realize that through sort of local and national data sets, that the rates of incarceration were really disparate for people of color compared to our majority populations. And we got to do some really interesting things to help bring not just awareness, but the change in the system. So one, we made an intentional effort to connect with the Police Chiefs Association, and annually we present to them in the Region 1 meeting to ensure that they all were aware of the different outcomes of local law enforcement traffic stops, rates of incarceration, and rates of recidivism. Because you think to your point, with the system change, just by looking at the first point of contact, the point of interaction at the local level in your neighborhood community where police are there to protect and serve, and you think what's happening in communities where people who look mostly like me live versus where people who look mostly like you, or you. And it was not the same set of interactions. So we began to start there with the data, and similar to Larome, we did not collect racial data for traffic stops at the time, so we couldn't necessarily show what was happening. But something happened at our neighboring state. People always ask, what's happening in Mass? What's happening in Connecticut?
Yeah.
When they really don't want to make change. But in Connecticut, they brought a lawsuit. The state was sued, and the local police departments were also sued to begin collecting that data, because they realized that until we had the data, we couldn't actually enact a system-wide change. So we piggybacked on Connecticut, having had that lawsuit have been successful in suing and transforming the state data collection strategy. And then we began working directly with the Department of Corrections, because for some reason they also didn't necessarily have racially identifiable data available. We had gender, we had type, and sometimes we would have a race, but it wasn't uniform across the board. So we're thinking about rates of reincarceration. We realized that we could start with the police, we could work with the correction system, and then there was a partner in the middle that we've missed altogether, and that was the court system, where they just did not collect racial demographic data. So we worked with the court clerks union and the chief justice and several others, and really began to look at this system. And while it hasn't changed, the rates haven't changed without a doubt. What has changed is our access to information and the reportability. So recognizing that there's a problem, I think, is always step one in terms of addressing that problem. And by creating a system where we now have access to data, where the regular report from the Department of Corrections includes racial, ethnic, demographic data, I think that's an important step for us. And it's taken a long time to get there. But now, as Larome said, we're, back to the future, we're going to continue to work forward to ensure that we're reducing the rates of incarceration for folks who look just like me.
Yeah, and I'm so happy to hear that it's happening here, right? We're doing the work, and that it's tiring, right? It's exhausting. It takes a lot of attentionality, like we've heard, right? That is the work of DEI, but the outcomes are always 1,000 times better, right? I mean, there's so much data that demonstrates that when you put intentionality behind it to listen to diverse perspectives, thoughts, voices, ideas, right? Everyone wins from this perspective. There's an example that comes from Flint, Michigan. DEI advocacy brought national attention to the water crisis. That was actually led by mothers and grassroots organizers, right? So folks impacted with a passion who wanted to make a change, and they transformed that silence into justice, right? So they moved from an action-oriented stance. What's a system or space that you've seen start to transform today due to DEI-focused voices or initiatives?
Transform for the positive or the worse?
That's on you to answer.
I would say the state of housing, and not just in Rhode Island, but across the nation. Housing is a sector where historically people of color have been barred or excluded from owning or accessing housing in certain areas. When I think of the impact of housing in general, it affects everything from our school. It determines where we go to school typically. It determines our health. Most of our housing in Rhode Island is old. We have contaminants in our homes because they were built at a time where these were legal, but things like lead and asbestos that continue to contribute toward rates of asthma, and that leads to sick time out of work, leads to sick days from school, and then the cumulative impacts over time for kids who miss 3, 4, 5 days of school each year, to becoming young adults who can't graduate from high school on time, to becoming adults who are engaged in the incarceration system. So I think housing,
that's such a great week through that
yeah. It has been one of those opportunities for us as a state to really reimagine. And fortunately, over the years, we've had a number of different administrations. And right now in Rhode Island, I'll say our House Speaker, Joe Shikarchi, has taken a strong and serious look at this as having been a professional in the space for a long time. Our governor's made significant investment in terms of our housing production and preservation. And we're starting to see greater access and opportunity. But at the same time, we have the impacts of the pandemic and skyrocketing inflation. So we're seeing more people moving to Rhode Island because it is such a great place. And this isn't always a bad thing, but it is bad when it displaces existing Rhode Islanders from housing that they've lived in potentially for generations.
Correct. You came here before the pandemic, so you're free from
know.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, what would you say is something you're seeing right now that's really being transformed?
I would say the appreciation of people with lived expertise and experiences. You want to think about when I was in corrections many years ago. If somebody was ever incarcerated, they could do nothing with you. You barely have a relationship with them. And now, whether it's incarceration, whether it's child welfare, whether it's social work, whether it's housing instability, you name it, those individuals, our people, are invited to have not just a seat at the table, but have a voice, have a say. Those people are often employed by the programs, and those people even lead some of the programs and departments, even here within the state that I know of.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And I just want to say, Kyle, you can drink the water.
I don't know if it was
fresh. No, you can drink the water. It's okay. I saw them pour it out of a bottle. It's come. And I love that you shared that, right? Because I think sometimes folks, when they think of DEI and it creating access and opportunity, or it's eliminating the barriers around, education or records or background and all those things, it benefits everyone at the end of the day, right? It's not just about supporting those who were incarcerated at one point, right?
Yeah.
It benefits everyone. I mean, I have personally benefited from not having the requirements of an education behind me, right? I mean, you teach at night. You're a professor. You have your doctorate. You're very, very well studied person. I don't have that background, right? I didn't get the chance to go to college. Most people assume because of the role that I have right now and what I do for a living. But my parents were like, we need you to go to work. We're going to lose our house if you don't bring in a paycheck.
Right.
And so rather than going to college at 18, I went right into corporate America in a call center job. And that's been my experience ever since, just building on it, right? And so DEI created even opportunity for me to be here, to be doing this conversation, right? So when people think it's only for those most marginalized or certain communities, yes, and, right?
Correct.
It creates access and opportunity for everyone.
I like you said, most people don't realize everybody benefits from DEI. It's not this monster that people talk about. It's not this stuff you didn't earn it, but it's like, no, actually, it's for everybody. There's not a person in this world who hasn't had some type of advantage, who don't need an advantage, and all the advantages are earned. We're all citizens. We all work together. We're all humans, so we all need, we all need that opportunity to just thrive.
That's all we're looking for. It's that shared thrive, right? I mean, again, the weave is the same underneath it all, right? And so I think that's really important to highlight. I've been trying to think about over the last few days of the Equity Challenge and coming into today's conversation about, has anything been hindered or misdirected due to DEI? And I'm thinking about it, I mean, could we have done more education around what diversity, equity, and inclusion actually is and what it means and how it benefits everyone? Yes, we could have absolutely done that. But has a DEI effort ever hurt anyone? Can you think of any? I can't think of anything, which
I was trying to reach the final. I love being like the person who I can't find any instances where, because of DEI, it adversely impacted me or anybody I know.
No.
Or how it's excluded anybody.
And
Well, I think there are some folks who've been excluded. And I would say that they are people who traditionally would be handpicked. I'll use an example from my own experience where I worked in the city of Providence for a mayor for a period of time. And one of the things that happened through his administration, for better or for worse, was I think DEI became a hot topic. And the HR team at the time really thought about bringing the best qualified, most connected individuals to positions in city employ. And that was a change where, as I was coming in, if you were an existing employee who was nearing retirement age, you could handpick your successor. And most times people would offer the position that they had currently to their son or daughter or to their grandson or granddaughter, and that person would be next in line for that position without an interview process, So just thinking about who's been displaced, potentially those that have had access to systems that provided preference because of proximity.
Yeah.
And I think when you open the application portal and you begin to look for the best qualified, for the most experienced or connected individuals in a system or bring them to the table, the individuals who formerly had access, exclusive access, have been potentially displaced unless they come to the table well qualified, well connected, and well experienced. And that, I think, is what Dr. Larome was saying. DEI makes us stronger and it makes us better because it does bring the best, the brightest, and most connected to the table.
correct, we're not sacrificing quality for quantity, right? We're still saying this is still highly qualified, the best of the best, right? Providing all the opportunities. You still lived that experience. You went through that experience. So it helps bring everyone through even stronger.
It helps expand a pool that you could, like you kind of talked about proximity. It's easy for us to just go with those in our network, those we're familiar with. But when you expand the pool, you're like, oh, wow, I didn't really see this. It's like showing a young person a new skill, bring them to a new city. Like, oh, bringing me to Rhode Island. I never knew the culture of Rhode Island exists, and I love it. Had I stayed in my local neighborhood, city, even state, I would have just been limited to that. And again, no, not a knock to it, but being able to see the entire world is like, wow, this is really great, and gaining expertise and experiences.
Absolutely right. And to that point, again, when we think about even the things that have been created due to diversity, equity, and inclusion, you think about, like, I know oftentimes folks think about the curbside cutouts, right? And how that was made for individuals who, were physically needing to use a wheelchair to get onto the sidewalk for safety. But that also benefits mothers with strollers, right? It benefits people carrying their laundry basket around.
But if it's me at nighttime or
Right.
daytime some days, I don't want to
Like-
take a step. The older I get, the less steps I want to take.
Exactly. When I used to be a runner, I used to run. I was like, if there was a sidewalk that did not have a curb cutout, I was like, oh, I gotta put a whole like extra set of effort just to jump over. But
Yep.
it's true, benefits everyone, right? And can you think of any other ways that things have benefited us globally from DEI?
I can, without a doubt. I mean, you mentioned academic attainment as a box. Larome, we talked a little bit about the criminal justice system, and we passed a law that bans the box on an application asking whether or not you've been involved with the criminal justice system. I think that's allowed more people to have access to employment, whether they had a trouble past or were engaged with the incarceration system at a young age, but years later have demonstrated success in a professional capacity. They now have equal opportunity to be employed gainfully in the same system. So I think this one little act, which took about 6 years to pass, the ban the box legislation, it had transformative impacts on the employment sector in Rhode Island.
Absolutely. And to the point earlier too, where you're talking about even housing being a topic and something that's necessary, right? I know a lot of folks, especially if you're listening, you might be thinking like housing. How would giving everybody a house benefit Rhode Islanders? If I could ask you that simple of a question.
I would start because as a housing first advocate, I'm always ready to jump in on this topic, but I ask one question. When you see encampments on the side of the road or along the sidewalk as you're passing by, ask one question that's related to population health. Where do you think people who are living in encampments use the bathroom?
Do you want to really know? I'm assuming outside.
I'm asking that as a rhetorical question, but I ask it in all sincerity because I think about the impacts on population health for people who are unhoused and what those impacts are on the others who live in close proximity again. 'Cause I do think there's a proximity measure that we look at, whether it's the impact of a vacant, foreclosed, abandoned house on a neighborhood and property values, or the impact of an encampment, a single encampment, on individuals within a certain proximity. And I think, well, that's just one question I ask. I also ask who picks up their trash. I think about how do they get into school? How do they prepare for their day and clean or bathe themselves? What are the things that happen when you are living outdoors in an encampment? And then I think, what happens when we bring everybody inside? Everyone has a safe, affordable, healthy place to store their belongings, to lay their head, and prepare for the next day. What are the impacts on those individuals, and how does that consequently impact the rest of us?
Correct.
And little Johnny's not tired at class, and the teacher doesn't have to continue to try to focus his attention. Does that benefit the rest of the class? When little Kyle is at work and is not falling asleep, does Kevin not have to shake him and wake him up, and he can give his attention to the rest of the staff? Yes, I think all of those things can be true, and there are many, many more benefits when we just think about every single person having a safe, affordable, healthy place to call home.
Absolutely. And again, I think it just goes back to the fact that it comes from this almost like scarcity mindset, right? Like it's like if you get a house, then that might mean I might not get a house, right? And so I'd rather you deal with an encampment than me have to deal with. But again, to the point, I'm like, if we just thought abundantly, right, openly about everybody gets a house.
It'd be like Oprah, you get a house and you get a house. Everybody gets a house.
But I'm like, also, I want everybody to have a shower. I want everybody to have access to like cook a meal and to go to bed. I mean,
it's one less worry for people.
Correct.
Like, I mean, why do you want somebody else to worry? And then if I get a house, you get a house, and they get a house. Like I didn't take the last house. Like there's more houses to go around. You get a house before I get a house, and then you get a house, you get a house. I'm like, oh my God, there's no more houses left. Nope, there's a house for me too. There's a place for a house, a resident. I'm gonna call it a residence place.
Yeah,
for people to stay.
So we come together and we build a new house.
Right. Yep.
Right, and I
And
think
we don't
that's-
have the last house. Right. We shouldn't want to be the last anything. I don't want to be the last.
Agree.
no, absolutely. And I also think about what better that would be for for everybody, right? For the workplace, I think people would be in better moods, people would feel better. I mean, so once again, right, it's about transforming systems and policies of change to look at it from a perspective of where did that belief even come from? Or why do we always do things this way, right? I mean, I asked the group from yesterday's conversation, what happens when we get stuck in that way of thinking of, well, we've always done it this way. Well, housing only should be belonging to this person, or this job should belong to this person. We get ourselves into a system of stagnation, right? Or we're stagnant, right? And then there's no movement. And what happens there, right? When we know ripples are actually intentional, right? In the waters and the waves, they help liven the water up again so that it's not stale and just standing there. Imagine if we could do that in each other's lives.
Right. Very well said.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I should have wrote that down.
I know, there you go.
You get a recording of this and play it.
We're gonna get a recording, exactly. So you got the whole thing. But I wanna end with a quote by Audre Lorde that says, "Revolution is not a one-time event." And so how do we continue to do this work with DEI, right? Recognizing that it's not a one-time event. Transformation isn't just once, right? We passed one effort, the ban the box. It took 6 years. Does it end there?
No.
No, at all.
Right? There's a lot more work that we've all got to do. And so I want to ask the both of you, what's one transformation or thing that we can do, especially for the folks watching or listening, small or large, that they can take a part in to be transformative?
One is just don't sit on the sidelines. This is not a spectator sport. This is one where it's all hands on deck. And there's two things. Since you came up with a quote, I'm gonna give two of them from Joe Madison. But normally I steal quotes. So the first time I get a person credit. Then the second time I say, I once heard somebody say, but the third time I say it's mine, I'm like, as I've always said.
Yep.
But since it's my first time, I'll quote Joe Madison, the Black Eagle. Remember Joe? Yes. I think we talked about Joe. He has two things. One, he says, what are you going to do about it? Anytime we have the conversation, I always ask myself, what am I going to do about it? Because we can't just wait on Kyle to do it, or Kevin to do it, or Vanessa to do it, or whoever to do it. It's what is Larome going to do about it? And every situation I'm in is what am I going to do about it? I went out to lunch with a brother, Rob Nance, earlier today, and he said he make it a point every day to do a good deed. And the good deed is a good deed. It doesn't have to be super big or super little. It's just a good
grand scale or no scale.
It's just a good deed. And are you doing it when nobody's watching? Yes. So that's one point. And then the second thing I was going to say is he asked a question. He says, what's the difference between a moment and a movement? And it's a sacrifice. And so are you willing to sacrifice doing this work? And so just for you all even putting together the equity challenge, and this time like we're sacrificing, or you're sacrificing yourself, we're sacrificing ourselves to do this work, because right now this stuff isn't popular. This isn't common. This is the boogeyman, but this is the right thing to do. The right thing has never been popular. It's like security. We always say for the working corrections, security is not a convenience. And this work, doing the right thing is not a convenience. It's not popular. It's not always sexy. It was sexy for about 2 months back in 2020.
Yeah.
And then it went back. And then they demonized it. But the work still must go on. So that's what I had to just.
I appreciate that. So not staying on the sidelines.
No, sit on the sideline. Get engaged.
Spectators, yeah.
Don't watch it. Get in.
Absolutely.
I'm so glad you brought up Joe Madison. I've been a long-time civil rights advocate. Had his own talk show podcast.
I'm a home face from Ohio.
Yes, sure enough. Central State University.
Yeah, HBCU.
And he was good friends with Dr. Arthur Thomas and others at the time, right? But I think about him and the last quote that you shared, the sacrifice piece, right? What's the difference between a moment and a movement? It's the sacrifice. I would say what we do to reignite this revolution is to engage our youth.
Yes.
And at the same time, I would encourage our youth to embrace the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Many times as young people, we are, and I still say we because I'm young, right? We are one issue voters. We come to the poll, we want to have this one issue be the thing that leads us. And we don't necessarily embrace the community as a whole and take a collective stance on how to move and empower our people to greater heights. I would say continue to engage our youth, and for our youth, I would encourage us all to continue to be comprehensive in our agenda and not just a one issue voter.
And I'm glad you said something too. Because a lot of time we colloquialize things or we acronym things up. One of my mentors always say, explain that TLA, what TLA, 3-letter acronym. So one thing you said diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we have to say that because if we just call it just DEI, like okay,
Yeah.
people don't understand what it is, and you wouldn't believe some people don't know what the acronym is.
Well, on the fourth day, if they don't know by now.
But we have to keep saying it and
We
say
have to
what it
keep
is
saying
and
it,
define it. Like this is what it is. Diversity isn't bad. What's the opposite of diversity?
Yeah.
What's the opposite of equity? What's the opposite of inclusion? So if everybody thinks diversity is bad, if anyone thinks equity is bad, if anybody thinks inclusion is bad, then we need a different conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to that point, there was someone that was going around on LinkedIn, shared something similar, and they said, when you say you don't agree with DEI, I would like to better understand, is it the diversity part, the equity part, or the inclusion part? And please let me know. Because when you think about it, like again, why would we have a problem or struggle with diversity, right? Again, perspective, thoughts, relationships. Diversity is diverse, right?
Well,
Equity,
everybody.
access and opportunity, and inclusion, feeling like you belong. What's the problem with it?
Right.
And so I think we do have to just continue to say the things, jump into the advocacy, don't sit on the sidelines. And really, to your point, Kyle, I think continue to work with our youth because I think they're open to it. I think they're seeing the wrongdoings of past generations and they want to make a difference.
Yes. And the revolution's never been led by the old. Just doesn't happen.
That's why we'll stay young.
I'm only 22, so
It's only,
I forgot to
I thought
say.
you were 28 with the math.
Yeah,
25 plus.
I was bad at that.
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
Benjamin Button over here.
Exactly. Absolutely good. Well, thank you guys so much again for being a part of today's conversation around DEI being transformative. And thank you all for watching and listening, and stay tuned again because tomorrow we'll be welcoming you all back to day 5, and we have another guest as well for that. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.